Christian?
Yeah.
Okay. We are now going to present a dramatization that we've worked hours and hours practicing. But I hope that at least those who have worked on this feel they know Henry Sabin better. I have really felt like I've come to know him better through this. And not only to know him, but to love him. And since I never did know him, it's really special to me. I'm going to ask my husband to be the narrator because his voice carries really well. And if this mic doesn't work too good, I think you can all hear. If you get too cold or hot, raise your hand and we'll try to adjust the air conditioners. For many years now, we've been holding these Henry Sabin reunions. And yet few of us really knew much about him. And even fewer actually knew him. So today, our goal is to get to know Henry Sabin better. And we're going to have a number of families act out some scenes from Henry's life. The family acting out the scene may not have the same number of boys and girls as in Henry's family, but each scene is a true episode from Henry's life.
In order to really know Henry, we need to remember something special about his parents. His father had been a pioneer boy whose family had come from Pennsylvania and crossed the plains with the covered wagons.
This is the first one.
His mother was a pioneer girl whose family had come from Wales. They had first crossed the ocean by ship and then joined the first handcart company to come to Utah. When this pioneer girl and pioneer boy grew up, they met and fell in love and became the parents of Henry Sabin.
They're not kissing cousins.
All right, we'll give them a hand. Henry was born in Payson, but his father bought a molasses mill in Salem. Who of you children have ever tasted molasses? Did anybody taste any of it today?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
No.
Well, then you'll have to blame Henry if you don't like it. Well, if you haven't tasted it, you can still get some today out in the recreational hall and have a chance to find out what it's like. The molasses mill that Henry's family owned made thousands of gallons of molasses, which was sold throughout the entire state. And of course, the whole family had to help during the molasses season when the mill was running day and night. Probably some of that molasses you tasted today was handed down from Henry. Well, Henry's father fixed up the molasses mill so it could also be used as a sawmill. Do you children know what a sawmill is? Who knows what a sawmill is? What do you saw in a sawmill? Toads?
Trees.
Some people saw
Wood. You saw wood in a sawmill, okay? When Henry was about 14, is anybody here 14 years of age?
He's like,
Where's Heather? Stand up, Heather. Well, he was 14 like Heather. Well, his job was to haul logs from the canyon to be sawed in the mill into lumber for building homes. You remember that Henry was born in Payson, but because the mill was in Salem, Henry's father decided to move the family to Salem. There, Henry's father built a new home for the family to live in. And you can imagine how proud Henry felt when his father sawed lumber for the new house from the logs that Henry had hauled out of Payson Canyon.
Yep, that's it.
When Henry was 21 years old, he fell in love with Nancy Jean Stone. Nancy Jane Stone. Well, if they'd have called her Jane instead of Jean, I wouldn't have made the mistake. They wanted to be married in the Manti Temple. They knew another couple who also planned to be married about the same time. So the four of them rode in a wagon to Manti. It took 2 days to get there. One day up and one day forward. And at night, the two girls slept in the wagon and the boys slept on the ground. Well, Henry and Nancy lived with their parents the first year they were married. Her father gave them some land on which to build their own two-room home. And once again, Henry hauled logs out of the canyon and had them sawed into lumber. But this time it was for his own home, for himself and Nancy. They also made adobe bricks, and Nancy cut rags and had them woven into carpets. And they made bed ticks, one filled with straw and another filled with feathers. And this gave them a soft bed to sleep on. Well, Henry and Nancy soon had a little family. 4 children. And then something happened that changed their lives and tested their faith. Henry received a call to go on a mission to the eastern states. Their oldest child was only 7, and the youngest just 1 year old. So it was with great faith and courage that Henry made preparation to leave his little family, trusting in God's care. He did all he could to prepare them before he left. He sold his horses to get a little money to leave with Nancy. And she had a few chickens, a cow, a garden, and 2 rows of gooseberries. The 2 older children would take the extra produce in their little wagon and sell it to their uncle, who was a merchant. The priesthood and other good, thoughtful neighbors held wood chopping bees to keep her supplied with wood. When Henry left, Nancy had 2 tons of coal for heat while he was gone. And she was so frugal and careful with it. When Henry returned, she was just burning their last lump of coal. I wonder if this could have been a blessing from the Lord. Reward their faith. Well, after Henry returned from his mission, he often gathered his family together in the evenings. He would get out his mission hymn book and sing songs to them, playing chords on the piano for accompaniment. Then he and Nancy had 4 more children. And this gave them a family of 8 altogether. And you can see them up here on the board if you look who those 8 children were. Well, Henry and Nancy also enjoyed spending time with their friends.
Just a minute. No, we have a hymn. She wants to sing.
Still I turn my minds with its rays. We think
Henry and Nancy enjoyed spending time with friends, especially in the winter, when there wasn't much farming to do. They had popcorn and cracked black walnuts for refreshments. There was no such thing as a cassette tape or a CD player in those days, but there was a new thing called a graphophone. Have any of you children ever played a phonograph, or is that too outdated now? Anybody play a phonograph in here?
Yes.
Just the old children. None of the young ones? Well, the graphophone played records like a phonograph does, but it had to be cranked by hand. And because of his love of music, Henry purchased one of these graphophones, and he and Nancy and their friends would stay up late at night cranking the graphophone and listening to the music.
Join us if you want popcorn.
Well, as you can imagine, Henry was not only a missionary and a farmer, but with all of that, he was a very hard worker and a very busy man. As a farmer, he grew watermelons, cantaloupes, peaches. During the melon season, the family took turns, 2 at a time, sweeping in the melon field to keep people from stealing the watermelon. The family would also take turns selling the melons at a stand they set up on the highway. A Del Monte cannery was built in Spanish Fork, and there Henry sold tomatoes and peas to the cannery. When the crops were harvested, Henry would take 1/10 of the grain or crops to the tithing office. This was their tithing to the Lord. This was called paying your tithing in kind. If he sold his produce for cash, he would pay his tithing with money. Well, Henry also taught his children to work hard. At first, he didn't think they had time for playing ball. But he did tell them they could play after their chores were done. This worked so well that Henry himself became quite a baseball fan. Besides farming, Henry was also a hard worker in the community and in the church. He was the secretary of the Salem Pond Company and a board member of the Highline Canal, ran the Strawberry Canal for many years. He was also a trustee of the town board. His faithfulness in the church is evident when he finds he served as a counselor in a bishopric for 10 years. One day, just before he turned 60, Henry was doing his fall plowing when he became very ill. He managed to crawl into his wagon, and the horses took him home. He died that night, leaving Nancy a widow when she was just 58 years of age. His children acknowledged that they owed much of their success in life to the training their father, Henry Sabin, had given them. We who are his grandchildren and great-grandchildren should stop and think today of what Henry Sabin has passed down to us, the great legacy he left us of faith, hard work, and love of family. All of us here are connected with Henry Sabin, either by direct bloodline or by marriage. We'd like each of the parents to take just a minute and tell how your family's connected to Henry Sabin. Now there's a large chart up here that we want the children to look at so they can see where they came from and how they're connected. So would we just start, do we have someone from each family, Marilyn?
Not everyone.
Why don't you call on them in the way you would like them to
Why don't we just call
go?
on some children that... Why don't we start with number one?
Let's see who's Elmer, number two.
All right, who's descended from Elmer here? You children know where you come from? So you know Elmer. Okay. Anyone in your family want to say anything about
Ask
this?
one of the children, like if they're a great-grandchild or what, they know just what they are. How
I
they-
am instructed to ask one of you children if you know how you're related to Henry Sabin. Is he your child, your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your aunt, your grandmother? Who's Henry Sabin? Can you tell us? He's your great, two greats? Great-great-grandfather. All right, good. Yeah.
I have a question. What's happened to Uncle Elmer's house?
I have an answer. Marilyn?
You better ask one of those descended from Elmer, one of
Marvin?
Elmer's family. What happened to Elmer's house?
Great-great-grandfather.
He's also your great-great-grandfather. And what's your name?
Brian.
And your last name?
Garner.
Yeah, and which one of these people up here is your grandfather? Or great-grandfather?
Merrill.
Merrill. So you come to Merrill's line. Okay, good. You're a Garner, are you? Well, I know your mommy and daddy. You're just bigger times. All right. Do we have somebody from that? Let's see where some other children are here. We got the same line over here, but well, I don't know whether everybody's here in order. My wife keeps telling me to do it a different way, and I'm not sure who will be obedient.
going to come.
Some want to know if there's anybody here from Ray.
Well, how you Ray?
Henry Sabin is
John?
to you.
Henry was my grandfather.
Blaine?
Yes, my grandfather. Unfortunately, we didn't know him. Somebody else didn't grow up with Henry. I guess he died right before I arrived.
All right, but he's your grandfather. So we have second grandfathers over here.
And how is this young man
This
related?
young man,
He's an in-law
Oh, we know. I
or an
just
outlaw.
Because he's about as close to anybody up there as.
Did you ever know Henry Sabin?
Henry.
Did you know Henry?
Henry.
Well, I'll leave that to my wife. She might want to follow that up in a minute. All right, we'll come back to that in just a minute then. So we've had her. Let's start with this young girl first and tell us your name. Allison, and you know what Henry Sabin is to you? He's your great-great-grandfather too. All right, fine. And then grandfathers? Have anybody besides great-great-grandfather and grandfather?
Henry was my grandfather.
So we got a grandfather here, and have we had a great-grandfather or just great-greats?
Great.
I'm a great.
You're a great. Are you bragging?
No.
Okay, so we got great greats, great, and grandfather.
So Nathan and Kelsey would be great.
Now Merrill's line, we already had represented, but we have more of Merrill's line here today. And do you girls know what Henry Sabin is to you also? He's your great great also. Becky, what is he to you? He's your great.
You know him. Well, and Jean's a
Do you want to say anything, Marilyn, about who all these people are? They may not know. And back and tell us your relation. Well, let's say first of all, anybody a great grandfather or great grandson? Like great grandfather back there. Well, the relationship. And now grandfather. Got grandfather here. And daughter-in-law. We're getting closer. Okay, fine.
What they remember. Now Naomi, I thought she would be here, and she isn't, but Marvin, do you know if you or Naomi were born first? You were born first. Okay. Stand up, Marvin. He's one of our celebrities because he really knew Henry Sabin. And then we have Uncle John knew him, and Aunt Eloise only met him once. But Uncle Randall, of course, is his son. He's the only son left, and he wasn't able to come. But he did write up some wonderful remembrances, and I left it out there on the table. So first of all, I'll tell you what Naomi said she remembered. She says, I remember he would hold me on his knee and tease and tickle me and was very jolly all the time. He took me to his watermelon farm sometimes where we would see broken melons that someone had taken. When I was a little older, I went with the family on a trip to Bryce, Zions, and Grand Canyon. Uncle Elmer and family went, and also Merrill and Marie. Everyone had such a good time. I cannot remember how old I was then, but the day he died was the saddest day, and I remember the day of his funeral. Grandma, who was always so jolly, seemed like a different person. And then Phyllis, who isn't here either, Phyllis Walton, who was Uncle Ray's daughter, said she was only very tiny, but she still remembers climbing up on his knee, and how her mother would say how much she loved to climb up on his lap. Evelyn was also very young, and she said she remembers watching him sharpen his knives on that wheel that would go round and round. How many of us cousins remember that wheel, that what was it called, a grinding? Grindstone.
He sharpened hay knives on it.
And sharpened knives and hay knives. And Evelyn says she remembers him also being very jolly and good with children. Now, I would like to turn a few minutes over to Marvin to tell what he remembers about his grandfather, Henry Sabin.
One thing I remember, it was always fun to go over to Grandma and Grandma Sabin's. Grandma Sabin was such a wonderful cook, and she always would give you a piece of cake or a cookie or whatever she had just for showing up. And, one of the things, Grandpa Sabin, he was very well organized. And when he put up his hay, he had what we called a hay force. Instead of just having a crew to go up with one hay rack, maybe kids don't even know what a hay rack is. In those days, we cut the hay with a mowing machine, just one swath at a time, went around the piece. And we raked it with a hay rack that would take 2 swaths and dump it, and then you'd have to bunch it like so, make a roadway, and then you'd come in with these hay racks, and you'd pitch it on the hay rack until it was about as tall as well, almost
I had
as
to
tall
pitch
as,
work and go.
about as tall as you could reach with big fork. And so Grandpa, in order to put that hay up in a hurry, he would have 3 wagons, 3 hay racks, with 3 teams. He would have either 1 or 2 men in the barn to stack it. He would have 2 pitchers in the field. And I got to ride the horse to raise it up into the barn. He always got me to ride the horse. I was about 6 or 7. So what happened, you'd have 1 hay rack in the field loading up the hay, and you'd have 1 on the road, and the other one was down at the barn unloading. We had these big Jackson forks. I don't know if you know what a Jackson fork is, but it's a great big hay fork, about that wide, and it had 4 tines that hooked like so. And it had this, where you hook it on would be a flexible bar that would come up with a big iron ring at the top, and that would hook onto the rope that would go up into the barn. And when the guy on the hay rack would unload, would push those tines down into the hay, and then lock this device on the top, and then he'd say, "Marvin, take it on up." And I'd get on the horse, and he'd raise it off the hay rack, and go up to the top where it would go into the barn, and cross on the track in the barn to where the people in the barn would say, "Dump it." And so that was a very efficient way to put up hay. You'd have 1 loading, 1 unloading, and 1 on the road. And you'd usually get a whole lot of hay done in 1 day. I remember this story that Pete told me one time. He said, Sam Christensen, I don't know how many of you know Sam, but he was about Pete's age. And they, Grandpa would always get people that he knew could work. So Sam was one of the pitchers in the field at this particular time. And he hired a guy who said he was the best hay pitcher in Nebraska to go with Sam. And when Pete came up, he was driving one of the hay racks. He said, "Tell your dad to get me somebody here who can pitch hay." He said, "I'm tired of doing my side and then going over and helping him do his side." So anyway, we had some good workers in the Sabin and Christensen families. They knew how to work when they needed to. But that was the way we used to put up hay. Well, Grandma and Grandpa used to invite my parents and Evelyn and I when they'd go to see a parade in some of these adjoining towns. And that was always a wonderful thing to do. This was never complete without getting an ice cream cone on the way home. That's the way Grandpa Henry was. I just won't take much longer, but I just wanted to read a couple of instances that my dad remembered about when he got home from his mission. He used to tell them stories about things that happened, and I guess most of them were pretty spiritual. But on one occasion, a bunch of the elders were going from one place to another to a conference. We called it a conference when they go to a missionary meeting. And even when I was a missionary, we called them conferences. And there was a bunch of bullies along the way. It was muddy. They didn't have paved walks, but they had boardwalks. These bullies were making missionaries get off the boardwalk and go out in the mud. When along came a big elder that was a good boxer, and he was a good size. He put his valise down, took out his coat, and says, "Now I want you guys off this walk, and I'll let my friends come by." He says, "If I have to, I'll lick the whole darn bunch of you." And they leaved him, and they all went off the mud. Well, another time, when now these are not instances that Grandpa actually had himself, but these were some of the elders that were out there when he was out there. Says one elder who was from the western states and had worked a lot shearing sheep was out in the country, and he came upon a family out there trying to shear a sheep. He said they had the mother and about 3 or 4 of the kids out trying to hold the sheep while the farmer was shearing sheep. And it would take him forever. And this elder went up and they told him he was a Mormon missionary. He'd like to tell them about our church. They started to deride him and tell him about you know, what they usually say about the Mormons and Paul's wives and so forth. The elder said, well, I can see you don't know any more about Mormonism than you do about shearing sheep. And they said, what do you know, preacher, about shearing sheep? He said, well, you go get me some pair of coveralls and I'll show you. They did and he did. How they sheared it in the Western manner, he was good at it. So that was an open. He had a chance then. The word went around those hills about that Mormon elder that knew how to shear sheep a lot better than any of them could figure out how to do it. Well, there's a lot more things I can remember about Grandpa Henry, but time is short. He was a great man and it was always good to be around him.
Was kind enough. I guess you have to get close to this for it to work. So when you come up to write down some things that Uncle Randall could remember, and he tried to put things down that were things that everybody didn't know. And so she's going to give you a few of the recollections from Uncle Randall.
He writes, I remember distinctly the layout of the house in the yard of our first home east of Salem. The house was built by Dad. It was a 2-room adobe building on the south with a lumber lean-to on the north. We had a barn on the east of the lot and fruit trees on the north. Just outside the back door was a well with a pump. Just north of it was a cellar in the ground with a roof over it. The roof was made of poles covered with branches of trees and then straw with dirt on top. There were steps on the south leading down to the door. We kept fruit and vegetables and other things there. One thing I really remember was when a cow got out and fell through the roof. What a mess that was. Broken fruit bottles, scattered other things, and a stupefied cow. That was really a Dr. Seuss moment, a cow in the cellar. In 1918, we sold the home and moved to one on the west side of Salem. 1918 was the year of the big flu epidemic. Many Salem people got it, and everyone in our family was sick but me and Dad. He had the job of tending the sick night and day without time for anything else, and so it was up to me, an 8-year-old, to do the chores. They consisted of milking about 6 cows, tending 4 or 5 horses, feeding pigs and chickens. The water had to be pumped for all the stock. I would get the morning chores done and then eat just in time to do it all over again for the night chores. Many people in Salem died, but thanks to my father's good nursing, none of our family died. Even I survived. Sometime during my childhood, possibly the winter after the flu epidemic, Father was very ill. I remember that Dr. Curtis came. I'm not sure what was wrong with him, but the words infection and head were used. I do know he was so sick he couldn't walk, and I remember members of the family pulling him around the house as he sat in a rocking chair. He was sick all winter long. We stayed in the bedroom. He stayed in the bedroom, and Mother nursed him there, and his only time out was when one of us dragged him out in the rocking chair. I still have that chair, and it's very precious to me. Dad used to raise sugar beets, as did many of the farmers around. He and another fellow had bigger wagons and horses than the rest. There got to be a friendly contest to see which of the two could haul in the most beets to the dump. There began to be some friendly betting among the other farmers. At the end of the season, when the weights of all the loads were totaled up, Dad had won by 12 pounds. One time, he and Uncle Dave went up the canyon for wood. They were trying to load a big log onto the wagon with a team. When the log rolled, pinning Uncle Dave underneath, Dad lifted the log long enough for Dave to crawl out from under it. He saved Dave, but in the process tore hernias on both sides, a condition he had to live with the rest of his life. He said he couldn't figure out how he alone could lift that much weight. He always felt he'd had some help. Is that it? That page? He was never particularly interested in sports until he had 3 of his boys playing baseball, Clyde, Merrill, and Randall. Then he'd go to all the games, even the ones that were played out of town. We children had always thought of him as a serious man, but I found as I grew up that I could joke and kid with him and get away with it. I got along with him very well during my teen years. I also learned that his favorite cuss word was "Dad burn it." The summer I graduated from high school, my older brothers got paying jobs away from home. I stayed and helped Dad on the farm all summer without collecting any wages. But at the end of the season, when the crops were all in and paid for, Dad showed he was a just man and an understanding one. He took me to Salt Lake and bought me a little second-hand Model T Ford. It was in this little car that my Aunt Ruth and I sped home from Idaho the next fall. After receiving word of my father's serious illness, it was our sorrow that we didn't arrive home in time to see him alive.
Remember Henry?
Henry, about Henry Sabin, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Well, I'll tell you, he was an ambitious man. There wasn't anything particular with church or home or whatever, with neighbors, what you could wish for. He had. He was a great man.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just wondered about how I could thank everybody that's helped. We've had so many helpers with the families that helped with the skit, and Joanne did this, and Carolyn and Dave set up all the tables, and I just, I'm sure I left a lot out, but I do want to thank everyone that's helped. Now this part, we're not finished yet. Now comes the time that we divide. We hope that you'll still have, that some of you still want to go canoeing, and I'd like Stephanie and Heather to come stand up. They have planned some fun activities for the children from, did we say 5 to 10? Around there, 5 to 10, but if you're 11 and want to do it, that's okay. 5 and up. They've got, and then Sheila's daughter, Jamie, had some special things planned, and I don't think there were enough there to do them, were they? And so she's left all the water balloons, so there's going to be a lot of fun over at the park. And while the kids are over there at the park, and a parent with them, we hope that there will be some of you, the rest of you will love to stay for the rest, which is our family sharing time. That way you can find out, all you cousins can find out what's going on in all the other cousins' families. Even Phyllis Walton sent news of her family, and Naomi sent news of her family, and Lynn even sent news of his family. So we're going to share that, and I'm going to I'll go in and see if the babysitters can stay a little bit longer for those of you going over to the park. If you want to leave your little ones there, I'll go in and find out. But we have some ice cream sandwiches for refreshments now while we're having this little break, and then let's say we all come back in 10 minutes, and let's pass those out outside on the lawn by the, oh, my directions are bad here.
The Boston City Jeep Posse became the world's search and rescue organization.
Say cheese! Are we having fun?
Yeah. Where's Grandma?
They're in that second canopy.
Okay.
She's just kind of sitting back. It's pretty hot. All right. I think Jane. Oh, they've got her. She's right there.
Hey, Ryan. Ryan. Rachel, let's see your flag waving. Is Brad asleep? He's oh. Hey, Brett.
Everyone says
Hi. You got a flag?